There is no comfortable way to say what I'm about to say, so I'll skip the comfort and start with the fact. My name is Helen Marie Davenport. I am 71 years old. I built a chain of veterinary clinics across Tennessee that made me, by any financial definition, a wealthy woman. I have a house on a hill outside Nashville with 4 bedrooms, a heated pool I never use, and a view of a valley that looks like a painting no one comes to see. I also have a son who calls me on scheduled holidays, a daughter who is cautiously willing to have lunch if I drive to her, and an ex-husband who remarried a woman who laughs more easily than I ever did. I am telling you this not because I want sympathy. I am telling you this because every piece of advice I'm about to give you was purchased at full price, and I want you to understand the receipt before you decide whether the lesson is worth anything. I grew up on a cattle farm outside Murfreesboro. If you've never been to Middle Tennessee, picture wide fields, red dirt, and the kind of silence that either comforts you or drives you out. It drove me out. My parents were good people, honest, tired, and broken the way that becomes a permanent condition rather than a temporary problem. My father, Earl, worked that land every single day I can remember. He didn't take vacations. He didn't have hobbies. He had the farm. He woke before dawn, came back after dark, and in between he gave that dirt everything a man could give. He died at 59, face down in the East Field. Heart attack mid-October, the tractor still running beside him. My mother found him. She said he looked peaceful. I don't think she was telling the truth. I think she said it because the alternative, that he looked like a man who had been consumed by the thing he served, was too heavy to carry out loud. My mother, Lorene, kept the farm going for another 6 years after that, mostly out of stubbornness. Then she sold it, moved into a small apartment in town, and lived another 14 years in a space so quiet you could hear the refrigerator cycle from any room. She didn't complain. She read library books, watched birds from her window, kept a small garden on the patio. When I visited, which was not often enough, she always said the same thing. "I'm fine, Helen. Tell me what you've been up to." And I would talk about the clinics, the expansion, the revenue, the new locations, and she would nod and smile, and I could see in her eyes that she was listening to the wrong channel, that what she wanted to hear was something I didn't know how to broadcast. I made a promise when I was 17, standing at my father's grave in a borrowed black dress. I promised I would not end up like them. I would not be trapped by something I couldn't escape. I would build something that gave me choices. Freedom. The word I used, in my own head, was freedom. I want you to remember that word, because it becomes important later. Not because I achieved it, but because I misunderstood it so completely that by the time I recognized my mistake, the cost was no longer refundable. I was a good student. Scholarships got me to the University of Tennessee, where I studied veterinary medicine. I chose it because I loved animals with a directness I never managed with people. Animals did not need you to perform. They did not keep score. A dog with a broken leg just needed the leg fixed. It didn't ask why you missed its birthday. I graduated near the top of my class and took a job at a small practice in Knoxville, and within 3 years I knew I didn't want to work for someone else. Not because the work was bad, because the ceiling was visible, and visible ceilings made me feel like my father, bending over the same dirt, year after year, while the sky stayed exactly where it was. I opened my first clinic in 1988, in a strip mall off Kingston Pike. I was 32 years old, terrified, and completely certain. If you think those two things can't coexist, you've never started a business. I worked 16-hour days. I treated patients in the morning, managed books in the afternoon, mopped floors at night. I ate dinner standing up. I slept like someone who was being chased, and the clinic grew. Within 2 years, I was profitable. Within 5, I opened a second location. Within 10, I had 4 clinics and a small team of vets working under me. I was building something. And building something, when you come from a family that only ever maintained something, feels like flying. I need to tell you about Tom now, because Tom is the part of this story that keeps me up at night, and not in the way you might expect. Thomas Allen Prescott. I married him in 1987, 1 year before the first clinic opened. He was a high school history teacher. He had brown eyes, a calm voice, and the unusual ability to be fully present wherever he stood. Tom did not multitask. When he talked to you, he talked to you. When he cooked dinner, the kitchen smelled like attention. When he graded papers, he wrote comments in the margins that his students kept for years. He was not ambitious in the way I understood ambition. He didn't want to build an empire. He wanted to build a day, a single, well-lived day, and then do it again tomorrow. I found this beautiful. I also found it, eventually, insufficient. That is a confession I still have trouble making. We had Luke in 1990 and Sophie in 1993. I was present for both deliveries and absent for much of what followed. I don't mean I disappeared. I was there, technically. I came to school plays. I signed permission slips. I put money into college funds with the regularity of a direct deposit. But there is a difference between being in the room and being in the moment, and my children learned that difference early. Tom filled the space I left. He was the one who knew their friends' names, who sat on the floor building Lego towers, who drove them to soccer practice and actually stayed to watch. I told myself we were a team. He handled the soft parts, I handled the structure. It sounded like a partnership. It was actually a division of labor that left one person doing all the living while the other one funded it. The clinics kept growing. By the time I was 45, I had 8 locations across Tennessee. I was managing staff, negotiating leases, reviewing profit and loss statements, attending veterinary conferences, hiring and firing, expanding and optimizing. I was good at it. I want to be clear about that, not out of vanity, but because it matters for what comes next. I was genuinely good at building this business. The problem with being good at something is that competence becomes its own justification. Every hour I spent working produced a measurable result. Every hour I spent at home produced something I couldn't quantify. And I had been trained, by poverty and by fear, to trust only what I could measure. Tom left when I was 52. I need to say that carefully, because accuracy matters here, and I spent years telling the story wrong. I used to say we grew apart, which is the phrase people use when they don't want to assign blame. The truth is simpler and harder. Tom didn't grow apart from me. He stayed exactly where he'd always been. I'm the one who moved, slowly, year by year, meeting by meeting, expansion by expansion, until the distance between us was no longer something you could cross with a conversation over dinner. He told me on a Sunday evening in March. The kids were both away at college. The house was quiet. He'd made pasta, the kind with fresh basil from the garden, the kind he made when he wanted to be present for something difficult. He said, "Helen, I need to tell you something, and I need you to hear it without solving it." I remember that sentence exactly because it described a thing I did not know how to do. Then he said he was leaving, not for someone else, not out of anger. He said, "And these words I will carry to the end of my life. I didn't leave because you failed, Helen. I left because you succeeded at everything except being here." He wasn't cruel. He wasn't even sad exactly. He was tired. The kind of tired that doesn't come from a bad night's sleep, but from years of reaching across a table and finding no one there. I handled the divorce the way I handled everything. Efficiently. Lawyers, paperwork, asset division. I was fair. I did not fight for the house or the savings in any vindictive way. I gave Tom what he was owed, and then some, because generosity with money was always easier for me than generosity with time. He moved to Chattanooga. Within 2 years, he married a woman named Claire, who taught yoga and kept bees. I know this because Sophie told me. I looked up Claire once on the internet, which I do not recommend if you want to maintain any dignity. She looked happy. Tom looked happy. They had a garden and a dog, and what appeared to be a life that moved at a pace compatible with actual human experience. I closed the laptop and went back to work, which is what I did with every feeling I did not know how to process. My children did not take sides during the divorce. That was almost worse than if they had. Luke, who was 22 at the time, said, "I think this is probably for the best, Mom. For the best." 3 words that sounded supportive but actually meant, "This was broken long before today and everyone knew except you." Sophie, 19, cried, but not the kind of crying that asks for comfort. She cried the way people cry at funerals for someone who had been sick a long time. Grief mixed with a strange, guilty relief that the waiting was over. In the years that followed, my relationship with Luke and Sophie became what I can only describe as structurally sound but uninhabited. We had a framework, holidays, birthdays, occasional dinners, but no one lived inside it. Luke became a physical therapist in Denver. He calls on Mother's Day, my birthday, and Christmas. The calls last between 8 and 14 minutes. He asks about the house, I ask about his work. We discuss the weather in our respective cities, and we hang up with the mutual understanding that we have fulfilled an obligation. He is not unkind. He is simply complete without me, in the way a building is complete without the architect who designed it. Functional, independent, and no longer in need of blueprints. Sophie is closer, both in geography and in willingness. She lives in Nashville and works as a middle school counselor. She lets me take her to lunch once a month, which I recognize as an act of generosity I have not fully earned. We talk about her students, her apartment, her friends. She does not talk much about her feelings regarding me. Once, about 2 years ago, after a glass of wine, she said, "Mom, I don't blame you for anything. I just wish I had more memories of you, where you weren't also thinking about something else. She said it softly, without accusation, the way someone describes the weather rather than protests it. I nodded. I didn't argue. There was nothing to argue with. She was right, and we both knew it, and the wine sat between us like a small, patient witness. I need to tell you about Diane. Diane Calloway was my best friend, and my original business partner. We opened that first clinic together in 1988. She was a vet too, sharper than me clinically, less driven commercially. She was the one the staff loved. She remembered everyone's anniversary. She brought baked goods on Mondays. She was, in many ways, the Tom of the business, the one who made the human machinery run, while I built the financial machinery around it. Diane left the practice in 2001. She was 45. She told me she wanted to live while she could still feel it. I thought it was reckless. I thought it was ungrateful. I told her she was making a mistake, that we were on the verge of something major, that the growth trajectory was, and she stopped me mid-sentence and said, "Helen, I know the trajectory. I just don't want to be on it anymore." She sold me her share. We stayed in touch loosely. She traveled. She volunteered at an animal rescue in Costa Rica for a year. She raised her 2 kids with a presence I privately envied and publicly dismissed. She lived a life that was small by my metrics and enormous by every metric that actually matters. Diane was diagnosed with ovarian cancer at 62. She died at 64, in her home, surrounded by what I can only describe as an impossible number of people who loved her. I went to the funeral. I stood in the back of a church in Franklin, Tennessee, and I listened to person after person stand up and describe a woman who had changed their life simply by being available to it. Her children spoke with a fluency about their mother that I knew my children would never have about me, not because they loved me less, but because they had less material to work with. Her ex-husband, who she'd remained close with, read a poem. Friends from 6 different countries sent letters. The room was so full they had to open the side doors. I drove home from that funeral and sat in my car in the garage for 45 minutes. I did not cry. I did something worse. I did the math. Diane had left the business 20 years before she died. 20 years of presence, of relationships, of slow mornings and long dinners and weekends that weren't optimized for anything. I had stayed. I had built 12 clinics, then 15, then 18. I had accumulated wealth, professional recognition, industry awards, and when I tried to picture my own funeral, I could populate the first 3 rows with employees and colleagues. After that, the pews went blurry. The night everything changed, or began to change, was the night of my 67th birthday. I had just crossed the milestone I had been building toward for 35 years. My net worth, between the clinics, the real estate, and the investments, had passed 7 figures. My operations manager, a capable woman named Patricia, organized a celebration at the flagship clinic in Nashville. 60 people came, catered food, a cake with my name on it, a slideshow of clinic milestones. People gave short speeches about my leadership, my vision, my impact on veterinary care in the region. It was generous, it was professional, and it was the loneliest night of my life. I stood in that room with a glass of champagne and I looked at every face, and I realized something that I had been outrunning for 20 years. There was not a single person in that room who was there because they loved me. They were there because I employed them, or supplied them, or signed their paychecks, or had been useful to their career. Every relationship in that room existed on a transactional foundation. If I had sold the business the day before, half of them would not have come. If I had sold it a year before, none of them would have come. I was not being celebrated. My balance sheet was being celebrated. I just happened to be standing next to it. Halfway through the party, I excused myself and walked to the bathroom at the end of the hall. I locked the door, sat on the closed lid of the toilet, and listened to the muffled sound of applause coming through the wall. Someone was giving another toast. I could hear my name, faintly. Helen, Helen, Helen. My name in the mouths of people who did not know me. My name echoing in a room full of people I had chosen for function, not for love. I sat there for 7 minutes. I know because I watched the clock on my phone. 7 minutes of sitting alone in a bathroom during a party thrown in my honor, and the only honest thought in my head was, you built exactly what you set out to build, and it is magnificent, and it is empty, and you have no one to blame but the woman sitting on this toilet. I sold the business 8 months later. The process was clinical, efficient, and well compensated. I received more money than my father earned in his entire life, more than my mother ever imagined, more than the 17-year-old girl at the graveside ever dreamed of. And when the wire transfer cleared, and I sat in my kitchen, with nothing to manage for the first time in 35 years, I discovered something that no financial plan had accounted for. I had no idea who I was without the work. The clinics had not just been my career. They had been my identity, my schedule, my social circle, my excuse, my anesthetic. Without them, I was a woman in an expensive house with a pool she never used, a view no one came to see, and a silence that was different from my mother's silence only in the price of the real estate. The first 6 months of retirement were not the relief I expected. They were a confrontation. Without the noise of productivity, I could hear everything I'd been drowning out. I heard Tom's voice saying, "You succeeded at everything except being here." I heard Sophie saying she wished she had more memories of me being present. I heard Diane saying she wanted to live while she could still feel it. I heard my mother asking, "Tell me what you've been up to," in a voice that was really asking, "Tell me who you are." And I had no answer. I had metrics. I had accomplishments. I had a portfolio, but I did not have an answer. I tried to fix it the way I fix everything, with a plan. I called Luke. I suggested we spend more time together. He said warmly and carefully, "That sounds nice, Mom. Let me check my schedule." He checked his schedule and found time for a weekend in April. We spent 2 days in Denver being polite. We went to restaurants and talked about safe subjects. And at the end, he hugged me and said, "This was great." And I drove to the airport knowing that we had shared 48 hours and not a single honest sentence. It was not his fault. He had built his life the way I had built mine, with the materials available. And I had not given him the material for anything deeper. You cannot withdraw intimacy you never deposited. Sophie was more willing, but more cautious. Our monthly lunches became something I prepared for the way I once prepared for board meetings, with anxiety, with strategy, with the fear of saying the wrong thing. She could tell. Over pasta one afternoon, she said, "Mom, you don't have to perform for me. Just be here. Just be here." The simplest instruction in the world, and the one I had spent an entire life failing to follow. I nodded. I tried. We ate the rest of the meal in a kind of gentle, imperfect quiet, and when she left, she squeezed my hand, and that squeeze contained more warmth than the entire champagne celebration in Nashville. 6 months after selling the business, I started volunteering at an animal shelter off Dickerson Pike. I told myself it was to stay busy. That was half true. The other half was something I couldn't name yet. The shelter was small, underfunded, loud with barking, and staffed by people who worked there not because it advanced anything, but because the animals needed them. Nobody there knew my net worth. Nobody cared about my expansion strategy. They needed someone to walk dogs and clean kennels and sit with animals who were scared. So that's what I did. The moment I think about most happened on a Tuesday afternoon in November. I was sitting on the concrete floor of Kennel 12 with a dog named Biscuit, an old hound, maybe 10 or 11, surrendered by a family that moved to an apartment that didn't allow pets. He'd been there 3 weeks. He wouldn't eat much. He spent most of his time pressed against the back wall with his head down. The staff said he was depressed. I don't know if dogs get depressed in the way humans do, but I know he was waiting for something that wasn't coming back. I sat down next to him, not to treat him. I wasn't there as a vet, just to be next to him. After about 10 minutes, he shifted his weight and leaned into me. Not dramatically, just a slow, heavy lean, the way old things settle when they find something solid. He put his head on my leg and let out a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deeper than his lungs. He didn't need me to build anything. He didn't need my expertise or my money or my strategic mind. He just needed a warm body that wasn't going to leave for a while. I sat on that concrete floor for 2 hours. My back hurt. My knees ached. I didn't move, and somewhere during those 2 hours, something I had been holding since I was 17 years old, that tight, electric promise that I would never be poor, never be stuck, never be my father dying in the field, quietly loosened its grip. Not because I had answered it, because I finally understood what it had cost. The freedom I had chased was real. I had it. I could go anywhere, buy anything, do whatever I wanted. And the thing I wanted most, to sit on a dirty floor with a sad old dog and feel needed for something other than my output, had been available for free the entire time, every single day, for 35 years, and I had been too busy being productive to notice. I adopted Biscuit. He lives with me now. He sleeps on a bed that cost more than my first month's rent, and he doesn't care. He follows me from room to room not because I'm impressive, but because I'm here. That distinction, between impressive and present, is the thing I wish someone had explained to me at 25, at 35, at 45, at any point before the cost of learning it became what it became. I am 71. I do not have the marriage back. Tom is happy with Claire, and I am glad for him. Truly. in the way you are glad for someone once the jealousy has burned through and left only honesty. I do not have the years back with Luke and Sophie. Those years are spent, and spent is a permanent condition. What I have is a monthly lunch with my daughter, where we are both trying, imperfectly, to build something from the materials that remain. What I have is a phone call with my son where, last Christmas, he stayed on the line for 22 minutes instead of 14, and I counted every one like a miser counting coins, because that is what they were. Small, precious deposits into an account I had neglected for decades. I am not telling you to quit your job. I am not telling you that ambition is poison or that money doesn't matter. It does matter. I grew up without it, and I know exactly what that costs. What I am telling you is this. Know what you're buying with the hours you spend, and know what you're selling to pay for them. I sold mornings with my children for quarterly growth. I sold evenings with my husband for operational efficiency. I sold my only real friendship for a growth trajectory, and every transaction felt rational at the time, because the returns were visible and the losses were silent. That is the trap. The things you're losing don't make noise when they leave. They just go. And by the time you notice the room is empty, the door has been closed for years. My father died in a field because he didn't know any other way. I nearly died in an office for the same reason. The only difference is that my heart kept beating long enough for me to notice what his didn't. That is not wisdom. That is luck. And I would rather you not need the luck. If any part of this reached you, even a single sentence, consider sharing it with someone who needs to hear it. I don't tell these stories because I've figured everything out. I tell them because sometimes the words one person learned too late are the exact words someone else still has time to use. Stay with me. There is always more to tell.